Well, just a little bit about me, and I think we're still not quite seeing the whole picture, but I'm not gonna work with that right now because I just think. So, part of my life experience has to do with 1,001 really bad blind dates, and if I could save you from that, it would make my life much better because I don't want you to endure the pain and the trauma that I have, but I know that you're at that time in your life when everybody comes up to you and goes, well, who are you dating and what are you doing and can I set you up? And I call it the sliced bread theory, right? If you're the end of the bread and somebody else is the end of another loaf of bread, we figure let's slap you together and make a sandwich because it's going to work. It doesn't work like that. Life is not like that. So I got to have a lot of amazingly bad blind date experiences. And you might ask yourself, well, why are these men up here? Well, this lovely individual was somebody that I took on a date once to a dance at BYU, and we went out to dinner and we ate shrimp. And he ate the shrimp with the shells on them, and he said that he liked them that way. And I think he just never learned not to eat the shrimp with the shell in. But it was kind of horrific, and needless to say, he was violently throwing up by the time that we were done with our date. So that was not the best possible experience. And there were all kinds of these guys. I grew up in southern Idaho, if that helps you at all. And then I went to Utah State University for some of my undergraduate. And there were lots and lots of these guys. And one of the ones that I dated was named Husk. And Husk liked to have the big game dinner. And so all year long, they'd shoot anything that moved, anything everywhere. They'd travel places to find things moving, then they'd shoot them, put them in their freezer, and at the end of the year, they'd have a big game dinner. You would not necessarily know what you were eating at that big game dinner, but you would have a chance to sample everything from rattlesnake to porcupine to stuff you wouldn't even want to know. And I thought, I don't know that I can do a lifetime of this, but I was still trying to figure out who I was and what fit. And so I found that dating was a lot like trying on shoes, because you just keep going and going. It is not my day, guys. We are having... Mac, did you go to sleep or did you die? There we go. Okay, so and this individual here, well, we'll start over here. He looks really nice, doesn't he? He was really nice, and this isn't the actual guy, but he was a lawyer. He was a very smart man, and I really admired him, and I was sad when he went to work for the U.S. Embassy because I thought, gosh, we had something special, and he just kept moving on with his career, and I kept thinking this is going to work out, and I visited him in D.C., and then I visited him when he went to London, and we just kind of kept going. But then he decided that he didn't like girls anymore, and he preferred something else, and I said, well, I don't think that's going to work out because I am, in fact, a girl. And so I had some of those experiences, and then finally, you're saying to yourself, really, she didn't date a chicken man. But I did, in fact, get set up with a man who worked at I don't know if you'd call it a chicken factory, an egg factory, or something of that nature, and he took me for a nice date. Now, mind you, he's got to be something like 30. I don't know. It was just not a good deal. And he took me to the high school football game in the small town where he lived. Nobody wants to see somebody come back at that age. And it was really, really cold. And he gave me his chicken farm overalls to wear during halftime because it was so cold. And I just thought, I'm going to kill you, Stuart. Stuart is the name of the man that set us up. And if I see him to this day, I will spit on him and give him a good karate kick because it was that bad. So I'm talking to you about what random gets you. Random is not a good thing. Life is about figuring out who you are and what you want from life. And if you don't know what you want from life, somebody else will either tell you or give it to you and say you should like it. And when you have an opportunity to be authentic, you have a chance to avoid all the bad blind dates that are going to be coming your way. So I'm really trying just to save you right now. So the idea of knowing thyself, knowing yourself, is a really important thing. Authentic leadership. Based on the concept of authenticity, a new paradigm has emerged in leadership literature through authentic leadership theory. Authentic leaders are those individuals who know who they are, what they think and behave, and are perceived by others as being aware of their own and others' values. It's starting to know yourself. Really, really important. And I like this quote. There are two great days in a person's life, the day we are born and the day that we discover why. I think everybody has a reason why they're born. And so that's part of why I'm here talking to you. You know that we're studying the core leadership principles and competencies, and I chose to talk about develop self and others. And to me, there's nothing more powerful than knowing who you are and what you want out of life, in all facets of life. Okay, now let's see if we can do this. I want it to be at about 1:14.
I mean, not every day, right? I mean, there's days when you come in and it's like everyone's just taken an I want to annoy Marcus pill, or days when you come in it's just boring. But there are other moments at work, aren't there? There are other moments where you get to feel like you're really using your strengths, where you get in that zone where the right decisions just come so easily to you. Or when you feel creative without really trying, and you just got one idea after another, where you feel challenged in just the way that you like to be challenged. Or moments when you dive into something and you get so involved in it, so focused on it, that when you're done with it, you're not tired. In fact, you're kind of fulfilled, and you almost wish that the activity that you were doing, well, your whole job was that activity. Moments like that, work can be great just because it can show you how great you can be. And your company knows this. I mean, that's why they're forever talking about where you get in that zone where...
The key point of what he said was that you feel it, you know it. When you start to stretch and you know that's exactly what you're capable of doing and that it's all you and you can handle everything, that starts to feel good to you. And the more that you can do things that feel good, the more you don't have to suffer through times that you're struggling and straining just to make it work. When you play to your strong suits and you don't worry as much about your weaknesses. So are there benefits to knowing yourself? Well, besides blind dating with somebody that you might actually like, yes, there are. The benefits of knowing yourself: less stress, becoming self-resilient and confident, having greater self-esteem, enjoying it, having fun, being strong, peace of mind, freedom, happiness, the ability to change in an easier way, obtaining what you want out of life. Those things are super important. And if you can figure that out now, you're going to be in so much better shape. Because, of course, the flip side of that is that there are consequences. Consequences of not knowing yourself. It means that you stumble a lot, that you struggle, that you have a hard time finding what fits, what feels good. It creates stress. It makes you dependent on other people. Sometimes you're unhappy or moody or depressed or just afraid, you know? And you go through times when you don't feel like you're worth it, like you just haven't found what works for you. And you look for ways to escape it, right? Whether it's substance abuse or whatever. You get bored and you get burned out. You know, you've all seen somebody with a career and they're rocking it for a while and then they're just like, I can't do this anymore. It was so hard. It was so much work. You don't want that to happen. You want to figure out what you want out of life. Such a better position to be in. And there's so much literature about it now, and I just want to talk for a second about some key resources. Now, the first resource that you have is access to the Cal program and to Kirk, because he's done a dissertation revolving around 360 degrees and how understanding your view of yourself versus other people's views of you, like your peers and your colleagues, your boss, and how all of that can be drawn together into kind of a three-dimensional picture. There's a lot of literature out there right now. So when you look at something like Strengthsfinder, Now Discover Your Strengths is a little bit of more feedback about that. But it does a little bit of an analysis, and you get to take a little online test, and then it starts to give you some feedback about what you're good at and what you aren't. When I was in the UV Self program last year, President Holland was my mentor, and we got to sit down for a while and talk about Strengthsfinder. And I was so curious to find out what his strengths were, because you've all seen him speak, and he's amazing, and he's a great president, and he's done so many things, but it's fun to kind of dial into the nitty-gritty and figure out what makes him tick. And we shared a few things, meaning we had a few of the same strengths. One of them was being strategic, and one of them was being a learner. One that I really like, and I'm just going to read this to you because Tara has it, Kyle Reyes has it, some of the people that I think of as just fantastic gurus of people have what's called Whoo. Can you imagine what Whoo is? Took me a minute to figure out. Working with others who have Whoo. Let me find the definition of Whoo for you. Woo stands for winning others over. You enjoy the challenge of meeting new people and getting them to like you. Strangers are rarely intimidating to you. On the contrary, strangers can be energizing. You are drawn to them. You want to learn their names, ask them questions, and find some common interest so that you can strike up a conversation and build rapport. People with Woo love people. Do you need somebody like that around when you're talking about sales at Adobe or whatever position you end up working at? Yeah, you got to build relationships. Will that help you in blind dating? It will. And I say blind dating, but you don't have to be blind to do it. Okay. So we start out by saying take control of your life. If you don't do it, then somebody else will. And sometimes that somebody isn't somebody you want to have doing it. And is it possible to plan your future if you don't know what you want out of it? It's not very good. It's kind of what I call dog's lunch. Does that speak to what I mean? I don't need to explain to you what dog's lunch is, do I? A hot meal, wherever you can find whatever pieces there are along the way. Not a pretty thing. So I encourage you to look at these kinds of things and define your strengths. Let me just see if I can pull this up.
Because when you were a kid and you were in class or you were in school and you found out you were good at maths but not very good at English, you didn't get more maths, did you? You got more English. You got remedial English. And your parents were in on this game. They were part of the ingraining process. The Gallup organization once asked this question. Your child comes home with the following grades. English A, Social Studies A, Biology C, Algebra F. Which grade deserves the most attention from you? The question didn't say if you pick one of the grades, you've got to ignore all the others. It just said, hey, look, here are the grades, and you've only got one thing to invest in your child, your time. Which grade deserves the most attention, the most time from you? 77% of parents would focus on the F. Now, the point here isn't that you should ignore the F any more than you should ignore your own weaknesses. You can't ignore weaknesses. The point is simply, and the truth, if you like, the truth that should replace the myth is that you're going to grow the most, you're going to develop the most in the areas where you already know the most. You grow the most in your areas of strength. In your areas of weakness, yeah, you can learn, but what learnings you gain are achieved with great effort and difficulty, and you don't get very much bang for your buck. I mean, me, growing up, I had a weakness for confrontation. I just wasn't very good at confronting
people. He's lovely, but I'm not going to let him tell you all about his confrontational issues. Can you start to see why it's so much easier to do what you're good at over a long period of time? How many of you have ever played golf? Anybody here? Have you ever made a Tiger Woods shot? Have you ever had something that just drives pure, straight, beautiful? Yeah, it's an awesome feeling, isn't it? But can you do it time after time after time? Because there's a consistency issue. When you find your strength, it's not just something that you enjoy doing, but it's something that you can replicate. It's something that comes easily enough. It can be with practice, but you can do it again. It doesn't mean that you just have a one-off on it, because you may have that shot, but I don't see anybody in here making the millions that Tiger is. So if you are, let me know. But I mean, I think that gets to the point that sometimes doing something takes so much effort and so much energy. Yeah, you could do it, but if it doesn't come easily enough to you, how can you sustain it? How can you just keep going with that and not hit burnout? You know, we all have things that are pros and things that are cons. So if you start working on the pros, you're going to have a lot more success. So let's talk for a second. There's some things that need to happen. If you're going to be successful, you're going to have to get to know yourself. What do you know about your own personality? Who are you behind your name? What are the characteristic traits that you have? What image do you portray to the outside world? What is your true nature as a person on a happy day, on a sad day, in the face of challenges or of great reward? How do you react to the world around you? Think about these things, you know, explore a little bit. Get to know your values. Which ones are you willing to compromise on? Which ones are you not willing to compromise? Honesty, integrity, security, flexibility. Is it dedication to others, wisdom and learning, financial comfort, or fun? Do you value loyalty above excellence, responsibility above ambition, or innovation above improvement? What order are your values in? And then think about situations. Understand what it's like to apply and implement these values in your life. If you don't know them, chances are you won't recognize when you should say no to something. And it feels a lot better to say no to something on this side of it than it does on the other side of it where there's a problem that you have to work through. So learn to understand what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. How well do you know your body? Are you a linebacker? Are you a ballerina? Are you built to play hockey? What does your body do for you? What about your breathing, your limits of balance, your flexibility? I'm right at the very brink right now of my limits of balance. I have on the tallest shoes that I own, and I'm not exactly sure why I chose them, but walking is good, and then sometimes you tip just a little bit. I'm right at that balance point, but I did my yoga this morning, and I'm getting better at some of those things, you know, so I decided I'd risk it. But if I fall down, nobody laugh, okay, because it could happen. What about your moods? Ooh, how many of us like to be called moody? It doesn't ever sound very nice, and I don't really like to be called that. But your moods can be good or bad, harmful and delightful. Don't underestimate their subtle power. Get to know what frustrates you and what brings you peace. Understand what makes you react a certain way and how you can manage a poor mood at critical times in your life. Learn your best and worst moods and find ways to manage the poor ones and ways to enhance the good ones. Learn to release your bad moods. Now, I was brought up in one of those homes where you wouldn't say dirt or anything bad if you had a mouth full of it. And so, you know, conflict was not valued in my home. Getting along and being nice was valued in my home. But as I went through, again, all those dates and eventually marriage, I had to have some type of a release. And I learned that if I could just go in the garage and slam the car door for a little while, just a few slams, I could release some of that bad mood. Or, you know, believe it or not, I used to be a marathon runner, and if you run enough miles, at some point, you're tired enough that your bad mood dissipates. And you just have to learn how to manage some of those things, right? Because who's responsible for you? Your mom? Your roommate? Your bishop? Kurt? Who's responsible for you? You are responsible for you. And you're in charge of your bad moods and your good moods. And I'm just going to make a little plug here for the Women's Success Center. There's a lot of wonderful, wonderful women that I work with, and I love having opportunities to see where they're going in their lives. But I also work with a lot of women who've been through some very difficult things and been through domestic violence and all kinds of different types of abuse. And I always think, how did somebody lose control of themselves so much that these things happened? They weren't in touch with what was happening from them and to them and around them. And if you can learn to balance those moods and understand what you need at this point in your life, you're going to be in such a better position. And maybe, you know, you're going to save yourself from having some of the experiences that you really wouldn't want to have. And finally, your likes and your dislikes. And this is the one that kind of gets back to the blind dating thing. The thing I never learned was just to say, ugh, I don't like that. That's not going to work for me. One of the most powerful things I ever learned was to say, thank you very much. I appreciate that you asked me to dance, but I've got something else I've got to go do right now. Or, you know, I'm not going to. You know, learning to say no is a really important thing. And so sometimes your likes and your dislikes are important clues that you need. Now, I understand that it's good to be nice, but I also understand that sometimes you just say no, and that's okay. Sometimes learning what you don't like is every bit as important as what you do like. And as you go through classes and you have experiences in life with roommates and all those things, you start to understand that not liking something is a clear message. So keep track of that. Start to figure out who you are. Really, really important. Stay true to your likes and your dislikes and to who you are. Now I'm going to teach you about a tool that's very helpful. It's called the Johari Window. Has anybody here worked with that before? A few of you have seen this? Well, it sounds kind of Middle Eastern and really interesting, but it's actually two researchers, one named Joseph and one named Harry. And they became Johari, the Johari Window. So if you can listen for just a second about this, then we'll talk about it afterwards.
to the mid-1950s
No.
by Joseph Luft and to the mid-1950s.
Still in there.
It can also be used to blind spots and
I promise you that we've had these all set before, but it's not holding in the presentation.
access. The Johari Window works best in a high-trust environment. The model consists of 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is called the open area and contains information about our behavior and motivation that is known both by ourselves and by others. The second quadrant is our private hidden area and contains information about ourselves, which we are unwilling to share, perhaps because of trust issues. The third quadrant is referred to as the blind area and contains things about ourselves that are known to others but are unknown to us. Other people know these things but are not willing to share them with us for whatever reason. The fourth quadrant is the unknown area of behavior, opinion, or motivation that neither we nor others are aware of. Obviously, the goal of the model is to make the open area as large as possible. Probably the easiest way to expand the open area is to move more into the hidden area. This can be done through self-disclosure. You simply choose to share or expose more of yourself. Expanding the open area into the blind area involves both asking for and receiving constructive feedback. And then self-disclosure and feedback among the participants will provide the shared knowledge that will move you more and more into the unknown area. Greater trust, feedback, and the sharing of information will continue to enlarge the open area. Sharing of feedback.
Okay, I need to go back just a little bit.
The third quadrant is referred to as the blind area and contains things about ourselves that are known to others but are unknown to us. Other people know these things but are not willing to share them with us for whatever reason. The fourth quadrant.
Okay, now that we have those pictures again, let's talk about that for just a second. Things that are known to self and known to others are very common, obvious things. You can see that I am a female. You can see that I work for UVU. You know that, and I know that. Very simple. This is kind of the persona that I have. I can look at you and say, you're a student. But how about those things that are hidden? Let's look at that for just a second. If you expose things that are known by self but unknown by others, you're able to grow that open area. What kinds of things do we know about ourselves? The good, the bad, and the ugly, right? We know all kinds of things about ourselves, and some of it we hide at all costs, and some of it we choose to share when we feel safe. But lots of things that we could give other people a little more information about, and they would know us, and we would know them, and it would be okay. So learning to explore that. So, for example, I am a closet introvert. I love to be with people, but then I have to regain my energy by doing something probably in a more isolated way, like marathon running, or I like to watch The Big Bang Theory. I mean, I have to have a moment, right? I just have to have a moment by myself so I can go and do a lot of things, but then the time comes when I'm like, all right, everybody just get off. And the thing about that is, not everybody thinks that. In fact, most people say, oh, you're such an extrovert, and I think, for a while I am, but then I have to set that down because it's kind of hard for me to do that. When you talk about things that are blind, well, these are things, this is the more interesting part of the conversation of the Johari Window. These are things that you don't know about yourself, but other people do. Now, search your mind for just a second. Try and think of something that you don't know about yourself. Well, you don't know. It's kind of hard, right? But if somebody brings it to your attention, it helps a little bit. So for me, I grew up with 2 other sisters, and I didn't have any brothers, and I think I always wanted to be in better physical shape. I didn't realize that I did this, but my sister said, oh yeah, every time you look in a mirror, you go like this. You know, you're sucking those cheeks, and you're like, how do I look? Did I drop 10 pounds? You know, and they'd make fun of me all the time, but I didn't realize it. I didn't know that I did that. I know some people don't realize that they have a little twitch, or they wink, or they talk too fast. So sometimes exploring what other people know about you can be really, really informative. Tara told me about a little experience that she had. I love it. She kept saying, are we all in agreement? Are we all in agreement? I want everybody to be in agreement. And her mentor stopped her and said, time out. Agreement is not a word. There's agreement, there's a... And it just took her by surprise, but she was able to learn something about herself that she didn't know. And because this mentor cared about her, she felt safe getting that information. But wouldn't it be valuable to kind of know what other people think? Again, why the 360 is valuable, why taking the leadership analysis in these Strengthsfinder books could be really, really helpful for you. Start to figure out who you are. And that unknown area can shrink a little bit, because right now, there's probably a lot that you don't know about yourself. How crazy is that? One of the key things that we learned in our UV Self program, and that's a leadership program that is sponsored by the university, we learned that so many leaders don't have self-awareness, that they don't know who they are and they don't know how other people perceive them. And so I would suggest to you that having a desire to move forward in leadership means that you start to know who you are and what you want out of life, what you're willing to give up, what you're willing to keep a hold of and not give up, because that's every bit as important as what you know. So this says that I found my happiness, and I suppose that's a little cheesy. I ended up marrying somebody from New Zealand. After all of those blind dates and all of those experiences, I ended up moving to New Zealand, marrying there. We eventually moved back here, obviously. But he likes to do things like this. He likes to do kiteboarding and windsurfing and all of those kinds of things. And I admire it greatly, but it was never what I thought that I would be with. And sometimes I just go, wow, this is new for me. I'm getting schooled in what life has to offer. And it's broadened my perspectives, but it's also taken some rough edges off me as well, because when somebody else is very different from you, you have to learn to find a way to work together. So I think had I learned that earlier in my life, I might have been better at doing this. But I'm having a lot of fun. I put this quote up here, and this is a picture of us. He doesn't like camping, right? He's never going to Idaho. It scares him to death. He can't stand the sagebrush, the wind, the cold, all those things. And his idea of camping is going on a cruise. So not the worst thing in the whole wide world, but we do end up in the Caribbean a lot. And this is outside of Puerto Rico. And I thought, who is that woman? I didn't know that was me. I wouldn't have guessed that ever in my 20s or even in my 30s. And yes, I'm old. So I think now, looking back, I thought, why didn't I take the time to stop and focus on who I was and what I could bring value to and what I really wanted and what I really didn't want? Life doesn't always deliver you things in the order and the way that you think that it will. In fact, it virtually never does that. But understanding what's agreeable and what isn't and how you can get it, super important. So the only person that knows what you want is you. Other people can give you little tidbits of information, but you're the one that really has the opportunity to figure out what you want in life. So I would encourage you to spend some time in this leadership program figuring out what you want. Take the Strengthsfinder test. Take a 360-degree. There are also very many informative places on campus, like the Career Development Center, that can start to give you tests about kind of what careers you're interested in. If you think you like something, interview somebody and say, hey, do you like doing this? Do you not? Start to know you and put the dislikes in one pile and the likes in one pile and then figure out what's going to work. But I know that you have such a bright future ahead of you, and I just encourage you to take every opportunity that you can to really discover yourself and what you have ahead of you. I appreciate your time today. I'm sorry that we had technical difficulties, but I hope that it's been valuable for you.